In states all across America, there's this military force that's pretty much hiding in plain sight. They're called state defense forces. But who are they really? And that question kicks off a really fascinating look into a hidden corner of our country's military structure. Okay, so let's just get right to it. Are members of state defense forces really soldiers? It sounds like a simple question, but the answer is surprisingly complicated. I mean, if you ask the federal government, informally, the answer you'll probably get is no. But is that really the whole story? So this is where it gets interesting. On one hand, you've got the common view. They're just volunteers, maybe some kind of auxiliary or civil defense group. But on the other hand, you have the actual evidence from the law, from history, and even from the words we use. And all that evidence points to something much more, that they are a state's organized militia. So let's follow the clues.
All right, our first clue takes us right back to the beginning, to the foundation of the U.S. government itself, the Constitution and its idea of a dual military. See, military power in the U.S. was never meant to be just a federal thing. While the Constitution gives Congress the power to raise armies and a navy, it specifically saves some key powers for the states. And what are those powers? The power to appoint militia officers and the authority to train that militia. This creates a dual system, a framework where state military forces are a totally legitimate foundational part of the country's design.
Okay, so we've got the big picture constitutional theory. For our second clue, let's get into the nitty-gritty of federal law. It's time to follow the legal paper trail. And that trail leads us to a very specific place in the United States Code, Title 32, Section 109. This is it. This is the actual statute where Congress officially recognizes state defense forces. And the wording here, well, it's pretty revealing. The law says that states may maintain other troops. Now, you have to remember, Congress is super careful with the words it uses in legislation. It didn't say volunteers. It didn't say civil defense units. It very specifically chose a military term. And troop isn't just some vague, fluffy word. Its definition is crystal clear: a soldier or a body of soldiers. So by using this specific word, federal law directly connects state defense forces to the idea of being soldiers. This isn't my interpretation. It's right there in the language of the law. All right, so laws and documents are one thing. But what about the real world? What's happening on the ground? Let's look at our third clue: what these forces actually do. When you look at how state defense forces operate, the picture gets super clear super fast. They wear military uniforms, they hold military ranks, they're subject to military discipline, and they train under established military doctrine. And here's the kicker: they are mobilized by the state for actual emergencies. You know the saying, if it looks like a military and functions like a military, well, you see where this is going. And don't think for a second that this is just some casual club. There is a formal, lawful chain of command. It starts all the way at the top with the state governor, who is the commander-in-chief. It then flows down through the state's military department to the SDF's own command structure, and all the way down to the individual member. This is the exact structure of a professional military organization. For our final clue, let's get a little nerdy and dig into the words we use every day to talk about this, because those words carry centuries of meaning. So clue number 4 is all about the meaning of words. Let's start with the word militia. We hear that word and sometimes think, oh, that's not a real soldier. But check this out. Its origin tells a totally different story. It comes straight from the Latin word miles, which literally means soldier. So the root of militia isn't just kind of related to soldiering, it is soldiering. And what about the term volunteer? Sometimes people use that to kind of diminish their status. But again, history disagrees. The word comes from the Latin word for will or choice, and historically it was used to describe how a person entered military service. They did it willingly, they weren't drafted. I mean, volunteer regiments are a cornerstone of American military history. Being a volunteer has always been a path to becoming a soldier, not some other category. This brings up a huge misconception people have, the idea that you've got to get paid to be a soldier. But a person's status isn't determined by a paycheck. What really defines a soldier is serving under lawful military authority within a military organization, being subject to military discipline, all for a military purpose. Not getting paid doesn't change any of that fundamental status. Okay, we've looked at the Constitution, at federal law, at how they function, and even at the words we use. It's time to put all the pieces together and deliver the final verdict. So let's just run through the evidence one more time, real quick. The U.S. Constitution, it establishes state military authority from day one. federal law, it explicitly calls these forces troops. Their function, they're organized and operate just like a military. And linguistics, the very words we use, like militia and volunteer, are deeply rooted in military tradition. Every single clue is pointing in the same direction. So the conclusion is pretty clear. Are they federal soldiers under the command of the president? No. But that's not the right question to ask. Based on all the evidence, members of a state defense force are, without a doubt, state soldiers serving their state under the authority of their governor. And that really leads us to a much bigger idea. Knowing that there's this legitimate, lawful form of state-level military service, completely separate from the federal armed forces, how does that change our view of what military service and civic duty even mean in America today? It's definitely something to think about.